Hello, everyone. I hope you enjoy the qualitative research session 1 today. And we will talk about qualitative research, my colleagues, and the next sessions as well. Today, I and Dr. Nima will cover some of the aspects of qualitative research, but it's worth saying that at the very beginning, I want to mention that to talk about qualitative research takes a long time. It's not possible to cover everything in just 1 or 2 sessions. And since I myself, I'm not quite sure about your background in qualitative research, we'll start from the very beginning, and both of us, I and Dr. Nima, will present some examples about qualitative research, and we hope that you enjoy the session. I want to emphasize that qualitative research is interactive, it is dynamic, and it is humanistic. Please keep these words in your mind. And let me see. Oh, yeah, great. In this part of the presentation, first I will talk about research in medical education, history, importance, multiple realities, study design, sampling and data collection in qualitative research, and I try to share my knowledge and understanding of qualitative research with you as in simple words, as much as possible. I want you to please come and join the talk. Have you ever done educational research in medical education in your fields of work and expertise and studies? Why and how did you do that? Could you please raise your hands and come into conversation? Have you ever done any type of educational research? Why and how? You can talk or you can write down what you're having your mind
in the chat box.
Yes, please. Could you please type in the chat box?
Yeah, so I researched about educational leadership and we introduced new teaching learning methods. There are two. So Sunita is saying we introduced new teaching learning method.
Yeah, that sounds great. Dr. Sunita, could you please tell us why you try to introduce a new teaching learning method? Or Dr. Azam, why did you research about educational leadership? Why? What did you have in your mind that you entered the research?
Assalamu alaikum, Prof.
Hello, welcome to the session. Yes, please.
Yes, I think we need to conduct research related to medical education to investigate some problems which maybe we face during medical education or method of teaching, to investigate the problem and also to find some solutions or to improve the method of teaching.
Yeah, very good. So you encountered a problem, an issue, and you decided to solve that problem or to find some solutions to answer the existing situation, for example, in your classroom. That's the reason that you entered into a research.
Yeah.
Could you please let us know, how did you investigate the issue? Which type of research did you use?
For example, if I start online teaching with a student, I will do a study by, for example, questionnaire, and I will ask the student about how the online teaching with them, what are the problems, and how we can improve the online teaching, or how we conduct the OSCE, or any other aspect related to medical education.
Okay,
so to collect the information from the student, to investigate the problem, then to find solution or to improve.
Okay, great. So you studied in that way. And Dr. Azam, what about you? How did you conducted the research on leadership? How did you do that? Dr. Sunita used questionnaires, and what did you do?
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Professor Shole. I used a qualitative method and especially grounded theory because leadership is a complex and multifactorial domain, and I had to assess this this title by qualitative because by quantitative methods, because quality could not answer my questions about educational leadership.
Okay, and why did you start your research? What was the primary stage, the first point that encouraged you to do a research?
Oh, I'm interested to educational leadership, and when I read articles, I noticed there is a gap, especially in medical education, leadership in medical education, and in my country, in Iran, there isn't enough studies about leadership.
Okay, thank you very much. So again, we see that both of you, you and Dr. Sunita, both of you, excuse me, can I change the slide? Yeah, both of you start your research by a problem. You encountered something in your teaching and learning environment, a problem, an issue, and tried to solve that problem by answering the questions. I'm quite sure that you gathered some new data or used the existing data for your new purpose, for example, for leadership or the teaching and learning method that Dr. Sunita and her colleagues want to offer to other people who are interested in the topic. And based on your experience and the empirical evidence, you followed your research. I'm quite sure that you had observation, you described different issues that you encountered during the research, and you used different procedures and different data analysis methods, which are, if I want to mention them, for example, qualitative research, quantitative research, or mixed research, which is a combination of both methodologies. Sometimes when we do a research, we want to have generalizations, or we come to some principles or theories, as Dr. Azza mentioned, that she went through her research by grounded theory. I'm quite sure that both of you were expert in your field and you had familiarity with the issues that you wanted to conduct a research on them. And as a researcher, we have to follow the issues in an unbiased way. We do not have to enter our own interest, to impose our interest, our feelings or thoughts, and we have to do the research in an unbiased way. To do a research is an unhurried activity, and we have to spend enough time to conduct all the stages of the research in a proper way. And the final step when we do a research is to share our reports with our stakeholders, those who were interested in our results. And usually we do that when we write a paper, we present a paper in a conference, we conduct a workshop or webinar, and this way we share our findings with others. In other words, we can say that the characteristic of educational research and medical education or in other fields consists of these 10 steps. You can find more in the book of Anderson and Arsenault on this issue, and I suggest you to have a look at that. Okay, if we come back to educational research and medical education, We have some people who are the researchers, and usually the researchers are faculty members and postgraduate studies, or students at master's and PhD levels are also those who want to conduct a research. They want to solve a problem. And every one of us, from the first day that we enter an educational setting, we can start doing research on our immediate environment. This research is sometimes interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary, and we can do that in diverse settings, in educational settings or in clinical educational settings. And finally, we have to report the results. Here, as you see in this slide, I have selected some of the topics that we do research on those according to our field of studies. For example, we can do research on knowledge, on expertise of students, on their abilities, on problem-based learning, on scholarship, or leadership, as you mentioned, as Dr. Sunita mentioned, teaching and learning methods. All of these are topics that we confront with them in the learning and teaching environments, and we can do research on them. And again, I want to refer to words of Sunita and Azam, and to mention that one part of our research could be quantitative. In quantitative research, we have just one reality. For example, teaching. We have reduction, control, prediction, everything is measurable, and we work with numbers. We work with measurements, and quantitative research, parts equal the whole. We have statistical methods, we put them all together, and researcher is separate from the research. They can work on different subjects, different people as our participants of the study, and their research findings are context-free. For example, if you do a research on one context, for example, in India, in USA, in England, in Iran, or any other part of the world, you can generalize the findings, and people in other areas of the world can use your findings. Any point about quantitative research? Do you want to share anything about it? I'm quite sure that you have the quantitative research section in previous sessions of the course. Any more point to add? Please raise your hands. Okay, so let's continue with this part. Now, in this session, we want to focus more on qualitative research. In qualitative research, we deal more with subjectivity. We have multiple realities, and that's totally different from quantitative research. We work on discovery, description, and understanding of the issues. We interpret the result as researchers. Here, the whole thing that we come to conclusion at the end is greater as different parts that we encountered during the research. We need to have rich narrative to describe everything in details, and we, as researchers, are instrument of research. We play a major role in the research process. We have participants of the study, and our results are quite context dependent. In other words, we explore the issues, we go deep, and we try to understand different things from the point of view of our participants. And since it's context dependent, the issue to generalize our findings to other contexts is sometimes under question, because people in different parts of the world are totally different from each other. But it doesn't mean that we cannot use the result of our studies. Otherwise, I could say that we can use the results. These give insights to other researchers in the other parts of the world, and the findings are applicable by different scientists, different scholars in different parts of the world. Now, please have a look at this slide. Could you please tell me, what do you see in this picture? Please raise your hands or write down in the chat box. What do you see here?
5 balls.
Great. You see glass balls, or you see eyeballs or different balls. What else?
Buns.
Any other information that you can get from this picture? Any other information that you can get from this picture?
5 different balls.
Oh, great, 5 different balls. So you add a new information. You add 5. You count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 balls. Yeah. What else? Yeah, different colors, different densities. And if I want to attract your attention to the next slide. You see 2 different types of responding. Some of you mentioned just glass balls or 5 glass balls. Some of you refer to densities. As you see here, you observed this slide and there are 2 different interpretations. Some of you viewed it quantitatively, 5. You worked with quantities. Another colleague mentioned that glass balls or glass marbles. So it shows that when we observe different issues and we consider our context, we have 2 different types of looking at different things, quantitatively or qualitatively. Please have those differences in your mind. Now, I want to mention that whenever you refer to literature, you see that qualitative research has different names. For example, in some texts, you see that it's called or it's named as naturalistic inquiry because everything happens in natural settings. And people in qualitative research, those who are investigated by us as researchers, they are engaged in daily life experiences or in natural settings. Sometimes in literature, we find interpretive research, and it is based on the assumption that social reality is not singular or objective, and it is shaped by human experiences and social context, and therefore it is best to be studied at a socio-historic or sociocultural context. Sometimes we say field study because we are doing qualitative research in our fields of expertise. For example, as our colleagues mentioned, in an organization, we want to work on leadership, or in a classroom, we want to work on our students. Or we will see that it is called inductive research. The reason is that it developed theories or generalities based on specific observations or data, begins with data collection, and identifies patterns to form new theories or hypotheses. Sometimes, as Dr. Azam mentioned, in the form of grand theory, we'll work on our data and we'll look for an emerging theory. So please consider that all these names refer to qualitative research. Qualitative research history goes back to early 20th century. It started from sociology, anthropology, and there are different philosophers who worked on qualitative research, and their practices in philosophy directs qualitative research. In order to name some of them, we can refer to Husserl, Heidegger, Sartre, Merleau-Ponty, and there are many, many other philosophers whose work on philosophy affected qualitative research. As I mentioned, qualitative research deals with people in their social settings. So meanings, concepts, definition, characteristics, metaphors, symbols, words, images, all of these things affect qualitative research. And in qualitative research, we deal with description of things. We need a rich narration. We need to describe the issues from the point of view of our study participants. So different factors influences the situation. All of them in our social settings confront different things. And each one of them has our own perspective on view about different happenings that we encounter with. Now, I want to mention another important point in qualitative research. One of the issues that we confront in the social settings is multiple reality. We mentioned that in quantitative research, you deal just with one reality, but in qualitative research, we have multiple realities. Could you please let me know what you see in this picture? Please raise your hands and talk about it or write in the chat box. What do you see in the picture?
Two points of view.
Oh, great. You see 2 points of view. Yeah. Another colleague mentioned 9. Someone says 6 or 9. Yeah. So we have different perspective. We have just one picture, but different perspectives. Some of us, yes, please.
Excuse me, this is Parveen. Excuse me, this is Parveen. Can I speak?
Yes, please.
Thanks. This picture shows about the one number, but by different view to person. It's maybe 9 or maybe 6, but it's related to person perception. But so we conclude that the participants' conception and participant conception is very highlighted in quality research.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. So our perspective and our stand, that where we stand when we want to see a reality. If you're at the right side of the picture, we see 9. If you're at the left side of the picture, we see 6. So in qualitative research, it's one of the most important things that we deal with multiple realities. The realities that are different according to our perspective, according to our social setting, and the interactions that take place in the social settings. We have one phenomenon, one number, but our experiences from that are different from each other. Now have a look at this picture, please. What do you see in these pictures? I want again to attract your attention to our social stand and what we perceive, what is our perspective, and how our perspectives affect the issues that we encounter with. It's very dominant in qualitative research. We have different perspectives according to our own stand, according to what we experience. Could you please type your concerns in the chat box? Yeah, it is a story that goes back to Rumi or Maulana. The story is about an elephant, but I want you to focus on what you see in these pictures. Please write down in the chat box. Please write down in the chat box. And please,
this is not
yourself.
possible for me that chatting box.
Okay.
Is it possible to?
What's that?
Yeah. Is it possible that I explain this picture?
No. Please write down everything in the chat. Please mute yourself because your microphone makes some interferences, and write down in the chat box. Yeah, some people is thinking that he or she touches the tail, or there is a tail. It's about our no, Miss Azam, please remember that we are not talking about your experiences. In this picture, I'm just asking you, what do you see? I want your vision. What do you see? Just a simple question and no interpretation at this time. I can say that, yes, our experiences are different from each other, and each one of us has another, no, limitation, yeah, that's right. But I'm not asking about your interpretation, Dr. Azam. I'm asking about what do you see in this picture? Please be careful about the differences. When you're asked about your interpretation or your understanding of something, or when I'm asking, what do you see here? Just tell me, what do you see here in each one of these pictures? For example, in this picture, what do you see here? Or the other one? Yeah, very good. Dr. Malik mentioned, and Dr. Vaji and some other colleagues, it's tail, or it's a man. No, it's not an elephant, because you do not see elephant in this picture. You just see a part. Yeah, tail is right. But even you do not know if that's the tail of an elephant. You guess that because you know that we are talking about an elephant. But what I actually look for is to attract your attention to what you see in this picture. As you see here, yeah, here you see the elephant. But what you noticed in the previous picture was not an elephant. You saw different parts, but because you know that it is an elephant, you mentioned that it's an elephant. But be careful, whenever we want to do a qualitative research, we have to bracket ourselves. We have just to look deeply, to observe deeply. And when we have a good observation, it is a great part of being a good qualitative researcher. Do not let what you knew from the past to affect what you encounter in a qualitative research. Again, I want to put emphasis that reality is constructed by each one of us, by individuals, and it happens when we interact with our social settings. So qualitative research is about our shared understandings, our perceptions, our lived experiences, how we make sense of something that we encounter. And it is about different phenomena, the phenomena that we choose to work on, and we want to find different experiences of people about that phenomena. Qualitative research is holistic. It views phenomena broadly, and in cases in which there's little known about an issue, we can explore different factors about that phenomenon or issue. And as I mentioned, our participants' perspectives is of major importance. We have to put those perspectives, the analysis of those perspectives, besides each other to find the greater picture. Qualitative research is systematic. It's replicable by researchers over times and different settings and through different research methods. And it is important to know that qualitative research is iterative. It can change our questions during the phases of the study. They can change our data collection methods. For example, sometimes we start with a qualitative part, and then we see that qualitative section is not enough. We have to go to a quantitative part as well, or we have to use different qualitative methodologies. So it is iterative. We can change them. And at the same time, they are interpretive. They can interpret the results. It's important to know that, and every one of us as a qualitative researcher, we play a major role in data gathering section and data analysis. We can observe behaviors in natural settings, and we can describe our participants. All the data that are gathered, we go through analysis of that data, even conventional or directed, and we can draw conclusions according to the information that we get. We can share our findings with others. As qualitative researchers, we go to the site, for example, the participant's home, office, or the places in which we can gather information. And as a qualitative researcher, we heavily influence qualitative research. And it is just different from quantitative research. In quantitative research, the influence of researcher is not that much. Researcher is not part of the study. It's not an instrument of research. But in qualitative studies, researcher is considered as instrument of research. We have different methodologies in qualitative research. For example, case study, ethnography, phenomenology, ground theory, action research, mixed research. And each one of these types of research give us an insight to the phenomenon which we are interested in and want to do research on that. I'm quite sure that every one of you, even those who are working in clinical settings or in educational settings, are familiar with the word cases. For example, when you encounter your patients, you call them cases. If you want to study one patient, a rare case, so that is a kind of case study. In case study, we go and study an individual, a group, an event, an activity, a program, or an ongoing process. And we want to come to conclusion about the characteristics, for example, of a single individual or a group. In case study, we can do it via intrinsic form, instrumental form, or multiple or collective form. It's worth saying that in all of these types of case study, we work on our phenomenon of interest, we gather information, and in this in-depth information is used for clarification of the cases with whom we encountered. We want to get a better understanding of our cases. We usually come to conclusion and generalize our conclusions, and we want to shed some light on those things or those issues about which we do not have enough information. So case study is something that most of us have used in our daily encounters and clinical or educational settings and have worked on that. When we work on ethnography, we work on attitudes, values, norms, practices, beliefs, language, culture, behavior, and actions of a group of people who live together. For example, in sociology, those sociologists work in ethnographic research, and we can do the same thing in our encounters and clinical and educational settings. We have phenomenology, in which we study a phenomenon of interest. We want to work on some phenomenon and to see the meaning things have in our experience. And it's a subjective experience, or in other words, the experience that our audience have from their own perspectives and from their own views. And we want to understand the phenomena of interest much more deeply. We want to know our participants' lived experiences to come to conclusion about the phenomenon that we choose to study. We have encountered different reactions and perceptions from different participants about one specific phenomenon. And we describe those perceptions and reactions. And to do that, we need to go through different data gathering methods and data collection methods, about which we'll talk more. It's worth saying that in phenomenological studies, we deeply look at our participants' statements, or they're saying about different phenomena. We want to investigate their experiences, or in other words, their lived experiences. Our gathered data can be classified into common themes or sub-themes, categories or subcategories according to the data that we look for, to find essential characteristics and the basics of their experience. And then we go through a narrative form to describe our findings from our participants' point of view. In ground theory, we have some similar points. We go through interview or different types of data gathering methods. At the same time, we do a content analysis, the same thing as in other forms of qualitative research. And from the data that we gather, a theory emerges. Again, the theory is grounded in the perspectives of our participants and their social interactions and their immediate environments. And we see the story from their point of view. And we have just a difference here that is called constant comparative analysis. In other words, the emerging theory is always tested against the collected data. And it is the difference that we encounter in grounded theory as constant comparative analysis. And we have one more type of research, which is usually very useful in our teaching and learning context. That's called action research. Here again, we encounter an issue or a problem, and we plan to solve the issue. We take the proper actions. We observe the changes that occur in response to our act, and then we reflect on that. And if we get the proper response, the first cycle is what we go through and everything ends. Otherwise, we go to the second cycle of planning, action, observing, reflecting, and then we can continue this research in action and to see the results. And it's worth saying that if you merge two types of qualitative and quantitative studies together, for example, in sequential designs, explanatory or exploratory, you can get much more results from your study. Sometimes your quantitative data collection and analysis must be followed by a qualitative data collection and analysis. You interpret the results and you use your quantitative part and what you gathered from the quantitative study into your qualitative section. And sometimes you start with the qualitative data collection and analysis, and you use your findings in order, for example, you get some information from your qualitative study and you go and make a questionnaire according to your findings, and you administer your questionnaire in a quantitative study to your participants of choice, and then you interpret the results. So we have all these designs. We can use quantitative research, qualitative research, or they can go through a sequential design of quantitative followed by a qualitative research, or qualitative followed by a quantitative research. It's worth saying that in all the research that we work on, ethical points are of major concern, and we need to get the approvals from our institutes and the participants of our studies. Dr. Nima will explain ethical issues in detail. Dr. Nima, it's highly appreciated if you could please take the lead and continue the presentation.
We go for this ethics and all. Let's see where we can and how we can use this qualitative research. So I will give you few examples how it has been used in health professions field, and you can then just observe those, and then let's discuss about it a little later. So almost 7 examples have taken out, and there are many more. It's not that these are some important one, but easy to understand. Well, one thing the research was done by Levin et al. Was the good career choice for women, and what it was they did that the female medical students mentoring experiences they collected. It was a multi-institutional qualitative research. Now see how many participants were there? 48 students, third and fourth year. they adhered to the focus group discussions with these students, and then they wanted to explore, that was the aim, that what is their mentoring relationship and what impact of the gender. Suppose your mentor is a male and you are female, then what will be the impact on those relationships? So that was the first case. The second was done on cancer. It's a life-changing process. And those who are cancer survivors, the women's 5 years experience, means after the treatment, who survived for 5 years, their experiences was collected. So 16 participants, 5 to 6 years of therapy, and now they are free of illness. So they took the in-depth interviews. And how many interviews were taken? 32. That means each woman must have given interview twice. And there was a fight to find out what was the deeper understanding of their experiences. It was not just the narration of that. Then there was one study which was done to find out how to recognize and respond to the suicidal crisis within a family and the social network. And there were 14 cases of suicides in the age group of 18 to 34. And they found 31 informants about that, because suicide, those who succumbed to suicide, they were not, it was not possible to available. But the family members and the social, their people in their social contacts, around 1 to 5 per case, they were in-depth interviews were taken. And then the difficulties, whatever was faced, interpreting the sides of suicide and the possible barriers, which may be intellectual barriers, which may be emotional barriers, for the awareness and what could be the intervention. That was discussed in this particular paper. There was a paper on experiences and expectations of health science students towards the licensing examination. So 15 health science students from a single institute were interviewed. It was a face-to-face interview. Per sample was purposive sample, and they did the open-ended questionnaires they used. So they explored the perception and expectation towards the relatively low performances in the licensure exams. There was one study which was done, which was a phenomenological analysis. And now you know what is meant by phenological and phenomenology, and the patient's experiences of medical student teaching encounters. That all of us, we study on rounds, we study at bed clinics, and our patients are there with us. So they interviewed 10 patients, in-depth interview, which was very, very minimally structured. And what was the purpose? It was to explore how that ordinary patient experienced the undergraduate medical teaching when they themselves become involved in it because of opportunity. And they derive that practical insights from these lived experiences of these patients. In addition to that, there was one ethnography study, which was a multi-sited ethnography study, interprofessional collaboration and family members involved in intensive care unit. So this study was done in 8 ICUs from North America, and there they interviewed healthcare providers who may be doctors, nurses, pharmacists, as well as family members, and see how many types of data collection methods they have used. There was observation, there was semi-structured interviews, and they also looked at the documentary data. What were the unique policies? What were the clinical guidelines which were followed by them? And the main purpose, as we have studied in the ethnography, it is about the attitude, it is about the culture, about the behavior, to explore the culture of the interprofessional collaboration and the family members' involvement, what could be the behaviors and attitude of these members. And the last one was a grounded theory design they used to stay or not to stay. And it is regarding the residents and residents' post-call behavior. Because when they do a 24 hours duty, and then what the residents may feel when they want to continue staying after that, or they want to leave and for that. So there were semi-structured interviews of 24 residents across 6 surgical, because they usually stay for this 24-hour shift, and then some non-surgical specialty programs. And they wanted to describe what is that post-call behavior the resident will have, and then understand what is the dominant rationalization, what they are saying, that whatever the decisions they are taking, whether to stay or not to stay, what will be the major one, and how they rationalize it, their stay or not stay. So now, looking at all these observations of these studies, there are 7 I've told you. What is your observation regarding this study? You must have read so far many studies which are quantitative. What do you think is different in these 7 studies? You can write in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and you can let me know what you want to say.
Method of data collections.
Huh?
Method of data collection, there is different in how to
So
collect the data.
what do you find that difference?
Type of interview, يعني little difference, type of the interview, and when
Okay.
study number 6, they use a different method of data collection. Also,
Okay.
I want to talk about this point, Prof. Can we use in one study different method of data collection?
That we will see later on. But your observation is correct that there were different methods of data collection. Most of them, as you said, was the interview. So what type of data it will give, the interview? What type of data you expect? Yes, qualitative data, but how it will be? Well, what do you mean by it will be a subjective data? What does people will be doing? That open, or is that open-ended questions you mean to say? What is open?
Yes, I think question and answer.
There will be questions and there will be answers. So these answers will be like what? Will it be one word, or will it, they will maybe giving opinions? So there will be, it will be in one word, one sentence. What do you expect? Okay, the questions may be unstructured, question may be semi-structured, but what about the answers? How long that interview will last? At least for 30-40 minutes each interview. So what you will get at the end?
I think according to type of questions, maybe
It
yes,
will be
yes,
a large data. Yes, you will
maybe
get.
yes, no, maybe ordinal data as we studied before.
There will be groups of answers or multiple answers, huge amount of data, because a person will be talking and talking and talking, and all this data is textual. Like when Dr. Sholay was talking, and you were getting her notes, whatever she is talking, it was getting replaced. You compile that, it will run pages after pages, isn't it? It is not something in few words or few as we get from the survey, or few numbers as we get. It will be a huge data. What else? What was your observation in addition to these methods?
Size of sample size is it depends of study, different from study to
Yes.
other study.
Yes, very large sample size.
No, it will be small.
It's very handful of people, no, who came into it. Okay, and was it only one particular group, or at times there are multiple groups? Multiple different people were there.
Yes,
I
some
think
of
it should be one group. One group with
Sometimes,
predetermined characteristics.
yeah, sometimes
Specifically.
it, like those cancer patient, it was only one particular group where we were interested. Sometimes it was multiple group, as it happened in the ICU. So it depends on what you want to find out. But as Dr. Sholay mentioned, different perspectives we were interested in. So when you are trying to explore something, you wanted people coming from the different perspective working in that area, same area. Did we discuss about the research question? Why Zainab is saying about the research question? Why you found it different? We didn't discuss about the research question. What you wanted to say about the research question? You may be
No,
right.
yeah, Professor, you said we can use single group or multiple groups. So I said according to the research question.
Okay, according to
can
the
choose
research
it
question,
or
you
not.
can have that.
Yeah.
What you want to find out. Okay, regarding the I showed you the purpose. What do you find from the purpose? Why only few people are answering? I think there are 31 people. Please answer. Based on the
Please
observation.
repeat the question again, please.
I said, what was the purpose of this type of studies? Those different 7 studies you've seen, no? What you think was the purpose? The purposes were different, but what it, can you tell me that? What is ultimately what the researcher were trying to find out? To gain insight, okay? Look into the difficulties. What else? Investigating what? Knowing the situation. Okay, they were trying to explore, or they were trying to make some explanation to come to a conclusion. But in quantitative research also we come to a conclusion. So how this is different? Supriya? To build hypothesis, okay? Are you talking to me in general why we do qualitative research, or you are talking related to the studies? For example, please explain your experience. Investigate the problem to find out the relationship. Okay. So we do the main purpose of the qualitative research, as you were saying, all of you were saying, it is to describe the situation. It is to solve problem. Maybe that ICU example, explore the factors to understand and interpret the situation being observed, to describe the experiences like the cancer patient, or to address the unique situation, the suicidal tendencies and the cases, what could be the recognition, or investing in the phenomena. But you have to remember that we are trying to understand it in a particular situation. The observer, the researcher is only observing, or researcher is talking to them, but they are not trying to change the situation, as we have seen in the quantitative type, where we are doing many times some intervention. When Sunita worked on the new teaching learning method, it was the new teaching learning method was introduced. It was something which was added. But here it is a naturalistic. If you look at from the research point of view, the quantitative and qualitative research, the research cycle remains the same. In both cases, you have to identify the problem. In both cases, you have to define the research question, have to design the study, gather data, analyze it, draw the conclusion. And that's why I asked Supriya, drawing conclusion can be for both, and then publish the report. So or one can go again, if you, after publishing the report, if you find the problem is not still solved, then you can work on it, or you can work on a different problem. But there are some differences, and this I'm not going to tell you. You have to tell me now. What is the assumption in quantitative research and what is the assumption in qualitative research? When we start from for the research, what is the assumption? The first assumption which is made, and Sholay told you about the qualitative research, what is the assumption? What is that? At least tell me for the qualitative.
Qualitative approach is
Assumption,
to
Because when we
Right.
start a research, there is some assumption which is there, with which then we have our research question, we try against that. So what is that for the qualitative research, what is the assumption? Opinion
assumption
is
is
taking the,
generated. Assumption is generated by qualitative research at the end, but in the quantitative research is at the first by researcher mind hypothesis. Yes.
okay, in quantitative research, the researcher will make the hypothesis, but
Yes.
ultimately making the hypothesis, what
Yes.
researcher is trying to, ultimately we do the research to find out what is the truth or what is the reality. So when we
Yes.
are making the hypothesis and you are trying to do the research and doing that, all those things, that collecting data, analysis, you are assuming that truth is already there, isn't it? You are just making the hypothesis, that null hypothesis where what we saw now, that A is not equal to B. Or A is equal to B is a null hypothesis, and our hypothesis A is better than B or B is better than A. So we are saying that the truth is already there. The one method is already superior to the other. This has been already assumed. But in case of qualitative research, Sholay introduced a very important terminology, multiple reality. Okay, that means the truth is constructed. The truth is not known. We are trying to explore it from the different perspective, and the researcher is going to construct it. It's not that there is no assumption in qualitative research. This is a prior assumption is there, that the truth is not existing. There are multiple realities like those elephant, and everyone is trying, you are taking the perspectives of all, and ultimately you are building up that elephant. Okay. What is the approach we do take in the quantitative research, and how the qualitative research is different from the quantitative? Is it inductive or it is deductive?
In
Deductive.
qualitative research is inductive, and in quantitative research is deductive.
Yeah.
Usually, but in the mixed method,
Usually, I agree with you.
yes.
So whenever we do the quantitative research, we have a theory, we make some hypothesis, we collect the data, and then we go on reducing this. This will not be there, this will not be there, and you deduce the fact. So that is an approach which you use. In inductive, you observe, you see the pattern, then you make the hypothesis and you develop the theory. So it is an inductive. What is the purpose of quantitative research and what is the purpose of qualitative? Qualitative we will discuss. What was the as against that background of exploring and describing, what is purpose of quantitative research?
In the quantitative research is
Quantitative is the
research reject or accept the hypothesis.
Yes,
Is
but
a
what is the
purpose of
purpose? What
research.
ultimately, by accepting the hypothesis, what you are doing?
What? Please repeat
Qualitative
again.
is exploratory.
Yeah.
What is quantitative? What is the purpose in quantitative research?
Quality.
Dr.
Then you are
Zainab,
doing
you wanted to,
Okay.
Dr. Zainab wanted to reply. Dr. Zainab Kazemi? Dr. Zainab?
mainly
Yes, what ultimately you
quantitative
are doing
research
when
is
you are
talking
making a
about studying the
hypothesis.
association.
Huh?
Yeah, quantitative research is mainly concerned with studying the association and the causation.
Yes, you are trying to find out the association, you are trying to find out what correlation. So you are trying to find out the relationship between the variables. Okay.
Yeah.
Here we are not doing that. What about the interventions where there will be intervention, which just now we said? Quantitative or qualitative?
Quantitative.
Quantitative,
is
there will be
intervention,
intervention.
yeah.
Qualitative is naturalistic. And therefore, what is the role of researcher? Sholem told you about the qualitative research. Yeah, there
I
is no
think
intervention.
quantitative,
What is the role of
uh,
researcher? In both. Quantitative, what will be the role?
in quantitative, the role of researcher is so weak, while in the qualitative, he is the main, he has the upper hand.
You can't say it is weak. You don't see the researcher. The researcher is there, of course. Researcher is collecting data. Researcher is doing making the research design, analyzing the data. But will the researcher be immersed, as in case of qualitative research? Researcher will. We always try to see the researcher is neutral. There is a. We put it. No, it is a double-blind study, or we take all the precaution to not to have the confounders. All those things are there. So the researcher will be away from the researcher bias. Researcher will be a neutral person. We will not say we did it and all. We try to make it as much as possible, write down everything and follow those things. In case of qualitative research, researcher is actually interacting and research whatever the people are saying, whatever they are, it is ultimately about exploring, examining, describing people, their social social or natural environment, socio-cultural status, and then their behavior. Where the researcher is an instrument, as this is a word which is used by Dr. Sholem, but you have to understand what is meant by this. One second, something is written over there. The focus of the qualitative research is the subjective experiences, attitude, meanings, and data collection is typically the various methods. Okay, what you can generalize and what you can't. Can you generalize quantitative research?
Yes.
You can. Our basic aim is the generalizability. We talk about that.
Yes.
If I do a study in Iraq, I should be able to, that same thing should be applied everywhere. In case of qualitative, will it be possible?
No, it is not possible because the sample size is small and it is based on individual opinion.
The sample size is small, I agree. There are individual opinions taken are agreeable, but it is mainly applicable to that particular situation. We may not be trying to, the aim is not to generalize. We want to find out or explain certain phenomena in that particular context. Okay, we will see how that generalization, just keep in mind, we will see it later on about the generalization again. Okay, so let's move further, and I will not show you these differences. What, my slides are not but I will hand over to Dr. Sholem. I will stop.
This part, we're going to talk about sampling and data collection methods. And I noticed that via your chats, you indicated that, the sampling and different types of it, just a brief review of what we encounter in qualitative research. And for example, I'm quite sure you know about snowballing or snowball sampling. Any idea about that? Any idea about snowball sampling? Yeah, Dr. Noman has mentioned that we start with, excuse me, what happened to this? I have a problem to noticing your points in the chat box on no result. I cannot move back and down your responses. So sorry about that. Yeah, Dr. Norman mentioned that you start from one person, then that very person leads us to other, and then the second leads us to third, and so on. Yeah, that's very good. So in the snowball sampling, we start with one participant. That participant will introduce us to other participants or who have information about our topic of choice. So in a snowball we start from one person and then go to other persons who know about the issue. What about a typical or representative sample? What about typical or representative sample? You're from same cohort. What do you mean by that? Dr. Kavitarati, if I Dr. Nima, for some unexpected reason, I cannot move back and forth via the chat box. Could you please let me know what are the codes are mentioning there?
High selective sample, prospective and representative is due to purpose.
And what do you mean, Dr. Madani, by high selective sample? What do you mean by that?
Can I talk, Prof?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Yes, high selective, that means يعني the study group, it will be only the people who are, يعني, for example, if I investigate a specific problem, that means I will include in this study, يعني, regarding the inclusion and exclusion criteria, I will include only the people who have that problem.
So you mean those people who are representative of the sample we want to study, those who have
Yes.
understanding of what we are studying, or important person or key persons who are representative of the sample. Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
And what about convenience sampling? Any idea about convenience sampling? As you see in the picture, we have a group of people who knows about the issue, the phenomenon of our interest, but we have access just to some of them. Those who are at hand, but who's are important to our study and who have enough information about what's going on about the phenomenon of the study. So we call it the convenience sample. In qualitative research, we have different other types of sampling. We have confirming sample, critical or unexpected or unusual sample, homogeneous sample, theoretical sample, confirming sample, opportunistic sample, or maximum variation sample. Could you please raise your hands and explain each one of them? Any student want to start from each one of them? Please unmute yourself and talk about them one by one. Yeah, Dr. Mihraseni says available people. I think she's talking about convenience sample. Dr. Noman mentioned those who are readily available.
Yeah, they were for the convenience sample. No one has written anything so far.
Yeah, and what about confirming sample? Any idea about confirming sample? You know, a confirming sample.
No, madam. Kavita is said that no, she doesn't have idea.
Okay, so a confirming sample is obtained when we want to confirm or disconfirm or the preliminary findings. So we have gathered some information in order to confirm or disconfirm those information, we take more samples. And whenever we talk about a critical sample, it is the sample that is, for example, we consider or judge some samples that are enlightening, but they are unusual or unexpected. They are critical because they have done something that has just opposite to their abilities. For example, we study some individuals who attain high achievements by serious physical limitations, so they are unexpected or unusual sample. Whenever we talk about homogeneous sample, we talk about the members that possess a certain trait or characteristics. For example, a group of high school students who are all judged to possess exceptional artistic talent, so they are homogeneous sample. Whenever we talk theoretical sample helps us as researchers to understand a concept or theory. For example, we select a group of tribal elders to assess the relevance of Piagetian theory to the education of Native Americans. So we choose them theoretically and to understand the concept or theory. We have opportunistic sample. For example, we choose our sample during study to take advantage of new conditions or circumstances that have arisen. For example, eyewitnesses. They are opportunistic samples. And we have another type of sampling that is mentioned here, which is maximal variation sample, and which one selected to present a diversity of perspective or characteristics. For example, a group of students who possess a wide variety of attitudes toward some school policies. So in each type of our research, we can use different samples, and I want to put emphasis on our sampling methods, and that during our work, we need to cover the samples and to study these samples in practice. It's not enough to know them just theoretically. For example, we can refer to different texts, different books. To read about sampling, what you have to do them in real practice. And I wish we could have the chance to do some research and practice, but unfortunately during these classes, we can just cover the issues from theoretical point of view. And about data collection methods, as you see in the slide, you can observe different issues. And please remember that by observation, we do not just mention or consider watching something. Hearing, smell, and using our 5 senses are important in a good observation. We can have conversation with our participants of the study, interviews, gathering documents, field notes, songs, even sending emails and get information from emails, scrapbooks, photographs, recordings, and memos, textual data, pictorial data. All of these things can support us and help us to collect data about the phenomenon of interest and the research topic that we are working on. Could you please let me know which kind of this data collection methods you have experienced before? Any idea? Have you ever used observations in your research? Yeah, Dr. Malik mentioned you gathered documents. Dr. Zahid, focus group discussion. And another colleague, what number 535465, an observational checklist for quantitative research, interview, observation. Okay, that sounds great. So, yeah, Dr. Madani, observation. And so you have this experience in your work, and each one of these methods can be used to collect data. When we want to deal with observation, as I mentioned, your different senses are involved in observation. It's not just your eyes, not just seeing, but different senses that every one of us have. We have complete participant or complete observation, participant as observer, or non-participant observation. Sometimes the researcher role is not known to the study participant, and the researcher is part of the group that he or she is going to study as all other group members, and naturally observe what's going on. In these cases, we call the researcher a complete participant. Sometimes what researcher is just an observer. They fully participating in the activities of the group, but the group knows that he or she is doing research. And we have non-participant observation when the researcher is not involved with situations is observing, sit on the sidelines and just watch. And I have a question from Dr. Nima for complete participant observation. Is it possible for the researcher to not letting know the participants of the study that when he or she is observing, she's doing the research? I want Dr. Nima will answer us on the ethical considerations section. And we must be considered that ethics is very important in all part of the study. You have to follow the ethical points. I just noticed that in your responses to Dr. Nima in the chat box, you refer to focus group, you refer to expert panel, structured, semi-structured, or unstructured interviews. And I want to ask one or two of you to please unmute yourself, raise your hands, unmute yourself, and talk about these things if you are interested to share your understandings with us. What is the difference between focus group or expert panel or individual interview? Anyone who has experience of individual interview?
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, ma'am, this is Supriya here. Hello.
Yes,
Yes,
please,
Supriya, go
go
on.
ahead.
Yeah, in the individual the interview, the individual has been asked about what is the opinion about that, and the interview has been taken individually. And in the focus group discussion, the n number of questions has been asked, and then the answer has been collected from the experiences of the group of the people.
Yeah, thank you very much. So for individual interview, yeah, you interview just one person, you ask questions. And as Dr. Nima mentioned, you ask open questions, closed questions, and you come to conclusion or you gather data from that individual. For focus group, you have a group of people who talk about the topic. And what is, could you please let us know, what is the difference between focus group and expert panel? Are we looking for consensus in a focus group? Or are we looking for consensus in an expert panel?
Ma'am?
Yes, please.
I'm not too sure about, but what I can think about focus group discussion, the layman's or the individual may or may not be the expert in their field, and the opinion has been taken from them. And the expert panel would be having an expert individual for the individual field, and the opinion has been gathered from them. I'm not too sure about this.
Yes, yes, that's right. That's absolutely right. And you were right.
Thank you.
From focus group, you're just asking people to share their ideas and we interpret their ideas. But in expert panels, because they are experts on the field, you're looking for consensus about a specific question. And what about structured, semi-structured, and unstructured interviews? Any idea? Please raise your hands if you want to unmute yourself and talk about your ideas.
Ma'am, in structured questions, the questions are already been framed. So the researcher has been already decided what question to be answer to be taken from the particular questions. Semi-structure could be like, some questions are open-ended questions. So the answers, the researcher may not be knowing what is the next question should be asked. And I think that is my opinion.
Any other idea about the structured, semi-structured, and unstructured interviews? Any other idea? Yeah, Dr. Mir Hosseini, you mentioned both of them. What do you mean by both of them? Could you please explain the structured, semi-structured, and non-structured? Yeah, very good. In a structured, you design questions in advance at the very beginning, and you just follow those questions and without any flexibility. In semi-structured, you have designed some questions, and then you add some more questions. For example, you use probing questions as well, and you probe your questions, you find more answers, and in semi-structured, you have flexibility in asking the questions and sequence of questions. And in unstructured, you do not follow any specific structure, or you do not have any specific questions in your mind, and you have not arranged them in advance. And mostly in qualitative research, we go through semi-structured interview. We have some questions as guided questions that we have prepared them in advance, and we go through some probing questions to get more information and to deeply investigate the responses of our participants. And it's worth saying that in order to get as much as you could from your participants and about the phenomenon of the study, it's good to have some open questions in mind, the general questions that give your participants the opportunity to talk about the issue openly and freely. Then you have some probing questions to investigate the answers more deeply. For example, what did you say, or could you explain more about the issue? And we have some closed questions. So if you go through this funnel effect, you can get as most as you can from your study participants. For example, have a look at these questions and answers about I don't know who's speaking. Oh, thank you. For example, if you want to do a research on teacher burnout, and if you want to start with some guided questions, for example, we can ask them, what factors contribute to teacher burnout? And of course, we are looking for our participants' point of view or perspectives. How do teachers perceive their burnout impacting classroom or interactions with students, colleagues, and administrators? And if we want to probe the questions, we will ask our participants, could you please explain more? Or what do you mean by, how did you conclude? What is the connection between this and that? And what do you think? So guided questions and probing questions will help us get the sufficient data that we are looking for, and to get more information about the phenomenon that we are studying. Dr. Nima, could you please continue?
I prepared this slide for quantitative and qualitative research differences with respect to sample, which we have done last time, sampling techniques for quantitative research. And now Sholay has already explained to you about the qualitative research. The sample size also we discussed, and as well as the data collection and the variable. She also mentioned about the data collection. You can hear me, no? Hello? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you, Dr. Nima.
Yeah. Because my video, even if it is on, I don't think it is working. So, Dr. Sholay mentioned about the interviews, focus group, observation. You can have diaries also if there are self-reports, case studies, documentary analysis, which someone has written in the chat box. You can have their experiential accounts, their reflections, or you can show them the video tape or audio tape and then ask participants to recall something, what was going on when that incident is happened, or some critical incident which has overwhelmed them emotionally. There is a lot of turmoil going on in their mind. And then you can analyze that or discuss that incidents or do the surveys. But remember, survey is not a very ideal thing or using the questionnaire. It could be one supportive thing. And most of the question in the surveys then have to be open-ended question, and they can't be the close-ended question. Even in the interviews, you can have some close-ended structure, but if you remember the funnel Dr. Sholay has shown, it is little towards the that narrower part of the funnel. So what is more important is you better have variety of data gathering approaches for that. So just don't have one or two methods, you can have more than that. And when you will get the data, it is like you are getting drowned in that data, because it will be pages after pages. You will be have been people have talked for 40 minutes, 1.5 hours for the interviews, or during the focus group discussion, which goes on for 1 hour or more, and then you are collecting that data. So how to analyze this data? So this analysis technique, next time we will be discussing on that. But remember, there are softwares now available. Many people are using this Atlas T, but NVivo is also commonly used. And there are various methods of analysis. And all these methods, whether it is a content analysis, how that constant comparison is done for the grounded theory, discourse analysis, conversation analysis, narrative analysis will be discussed in the next session. But basically, the steps remain the same, that you have to transcribe when you are taking that data, collecting the data. It will be notes were taken, or there will be audio taping will be done. Usually people try to avoid video taping because people get very conscious in front of video. But you have to ultimately transcribe that, you have to read that data thoroughly, and then code that data. One has to develop the code, finalize and apply. And then has to assess the coding consistency also. And then whatever the discrepancies are there, it should be avoided. Now, when that coding consistency or the differences will come, when there are multiple analyzers. And in qualitative data, you usually have multiple analyzers or the researchers who are doing that job. So when it is not that we always try to get the consensus, but it is mainly to discuss and see the different viewpoints. That is the basic aim of the qualitative research. Then from those, after the coding is done and the categories are developed, you can decide what are the different themes emerging out from that category and combine them. And maybe you can go to a theoretical framework or a theory formation. But many a times people, they just stop at showing different patterns, showing different themes, what are the recurring issues. And then the next step is a reporting. So all these things we will be covering next time. But what happens in why there is a criticism for the qualitative research, that as someone said earlier, it is a subjective data. It is an interpretative data, the nature of that qualitative research. And it is people will do what? Well, people will it is all about that what people will think and what people how they feel about it. But ultimately, we really don't know what they are thinking, what is going on in their mind, and we don't know how they are feeling. It is what they say that they are thinking, and it is what they say how they are feeling. That is what we are capturing all about. And then in addition to that, the researcher is making the interpretation based on whatever data the person has gathered, what the person has observed. And therefore, it becomes a difficult thing. And there is an influence of the researcher on data collection, data analysis, and the inferences and interpretation on the data. You remember Dr. Sholay asked you what you see in that picture. And you started telling that if the Maulana story and there is an elephant, because you had earlier that you knew about it. So your prior ideas or your prior assumptions, your prior biases are going to affect what you are observing. Even if that observation, you have to make something as an observation, you are observing that with your prior knowledge, and that may affect the research findings. And there is a lack of reproducibility, because as we said, generalizability is not there. It is only in that context. But in that context also, whether it becomes a reproducible, people don't know. And that's why the qualitative research has received various criticism. But if you are interested in it, because you are finding it gives you some additional advantage. It allows you to explore. Everything can't be by quantitative method, you can't explain everything. And for that, if you want to do the qualitative study, you should ensure its trustworthiness. And what should be done? So every procedural description should be backed by the example. So there has to be clarification and justification for why you are doing the research, how you have come up to that research question, what selection of the qualitative, why you are selecting the qualitative approach for this type of study, and what study design you are doing. You have to observe the scientific rigor, and this scientific rigor, you can read this particular article we will pass on to you by Quito et al. That there can be procedural rigor, there is a representativeness which Dr. Sholay mentioned, interpretative rigor, and the evaluative rigor. Now, procedural rigor is whatever the procedure what you have been doing, right from that data collection or finding out that sample, the sampling technique, to the data collection, to the data analysis. Of how and what is meant by rigor? It is an appropriateness and thoroughness in that research method, what you have, or whatever the method you are selecting. So there has to be procedural rigor. Representativeness is something which is related to your sampling. Why you are selecting a particular sample? Why whether maximum variation sampling you can use to get that more heterogeneity, snow balloon sampling, why you are going for that, or so various sampling techniques Sholay has mentioned to you. But you have to say that why your volunteers or the participants you have selected are like that, and why you have not selected the other. That will tell you the representativeness. Now, interpretative rigor is related to that analysis method and the outcomes based on that interpretation of that particular analysis. So that you have to have the rigor in that, for that you can have the multiple researcher coming in. You can ask you have to confirm whatever the people have mentioned or your participants have mentioned. So let the participants go through that, whatever you have. After the interview, you are compiling everything and you are putting it. Let the participants go through that and say that, okay, they have said the same thing, because your interpretation may be wrong, what they are saying. They may be having something in their mind, but they may not have said it properly. So that respondent validation, having different methods so you can confirm that data, that is data triangulation, or you can also various theoretical frameworks you are thinking about it when you are going ahead. So which different multiple frameworks you have seen. And there may be some deviance, something may not be falling into that pattern which you are seeking. Something is maybe negating or something may be deviating from what you are seeing. But you have to mention that in your study. All this will say that, okay, you can't ignore. In the case of, as we have said in the quantitative method, outliers you can ignore, but here, no. You have to mention about those outliers or which is different, because that could be also very important. So this interpretative rigor. And then the evaluative rigor. And evaluative rigor is mainly related to the ethical aspect or the political aspect, whether you have taken the ethical approval properly, or there is some problem while taking the ethical approval. You may have taken the ethical approval, but it is not taken based on the ethical principle. What you have told them in that informed consent document, because some people say that we need not tell them. Then once it is, they know that it is a research, then it could be different. That way, it is an ethical research. Then people may say that it is a contaminated data. One should have an uncontaminated data without telling the participant what we are observing them, and then it will be in that naturalistic manner. But that is not correct. You have to tell them beforehand if you are doing the research and what steps you are taking to avoid any harm to the patient. The harm will be minimal because we are saying it is only interview. But are there some questions which you are asking which are very sensitive? Are there some questions which are making the participants go through their, like we discuss about the cancer survivors' experiences? So suppose I'm asking them the question, will they experience what agony they went through and that will make their stressful to them? All these things you have to take care of. And that has to be written. And this is the credibility of your result. As I said, for the sampling and sample size, what method, volunteers, which volunteers should, who are selected and why they are selected as volunteers, what is the rationale for the data collection method and why you are selecting multiple methods and why those only, what is a fitness for purpose, what you are doing, tape recording, you are noting down the thing, there will be multiple or parallel notes have been taken. How, if you have developed an instrument or a question, how you have designed that, whether you have piloted that, and what data analysis, how you are doing it. And then the reliability, the same result while getting the data gathering or the analysis. So maybe you will be asking the participants once again, and the validity, whether the results are accurate or true, and then coming to the conclusion, and as I said, attention to the negative cases as well. Your data has to be transparent. So all these things have to be clearly communicated when you are writing the report. The way you have collected the data, how it is collected, how you are analyzed. In case of quantitative, we just write that key test should be done. It is a very small para which is there. Here you have to give the, in writing also, you have to explain that or mention that. And so the others who will be reading your report will verify the findings of that project. They will replicate in their mind, okay, this has been done. So it appears that this data is trustworthy. So what we used to call in the quantitative research as internal validity, you are now aware of this term, what is meant by internal validity, whether our results are accurate because of our procedure, what we are doing. It's called as credibility in case of qualitative research, and that is a confidence in the data and its interpretation. The external validity or the generalizability, we call it in the qualitative research, it's the transferability. Now, this transferability will, as we said, that the data is not, actually the study is not done for the generalization. It is to find out or explore what happens in that particular context or in that particular situation. Now, how that will become transferable? It is not that each and everything may be transferable, but there may be some aspect when I'm reading something that what is going on in the department, so that all the residents are behaving very in an accountable manner. If I'm doing a qualitative study like that, then I may write the report and I may say that these are the patterns which are responsible for the accountability and this may not be there. Someone who is reading that report will say that, okay, these some points may be applicable in my situation also. It is a similar situation I am facing and there is a possibility of application. This is called as transferability. So someone may really take up such study and there may be something different emerging because their context is different, but there are something which is remaining the same, and then that gives you credibility to your own data. Reliability or dependability, that is a replicability. And objectivity, what we say is, here it is a conformability, which is the accuracy of study finding. Parallel data collection, parallel analysis, all these things help you to confirm your findings. So there could be different things you can use. I'm using the Professor Janet's grant slide and added some of the things on my own. But you can circulate the draft in earlier to your informed colleagues and experts, and then see that those drafts, whatever you have circulating, maybe this is how you are going to study your protocol or your guide which you are using, or that questionnaire which you are using. We call it as facilitator's guide to the experts. You can go back to the sources for comment once you make the write down all the notes and after transcribing. You can discuss and argue whatever you have written and your interpretation with other researchers. You can cross-check the note-taking. You can have the parallel data gathering, we said, triangulation using different methods, parallel data analysis. You can combine with some quantitative methods, as Sholay said, and do a mixed method research, one supporting the other, or back up with the examples every time. And that's why you will see in the report of the qualitative study, there are quotes have been given in support of why you are interpreting it this way. The quotes by the participants have been mentioned. And you should differentiate your report from your interpretation. So establish the rigorous data analysis method, provide details of gathering and processing. You should involve multiple researchers. They may be involved in data collection, coding, analysis, and the research topics impact on the recruitment that you have to take into consideration. Be aware and acknowledge, think about the bias at every step, what bias can come up and how you are acknowledging that bias. And then ask the participants, as I said, to review the transcript and use the most disinterested people in your department who have never researched your own innovation. They are not expert in the field, and ask them to look at your interpretation and your report, and they may come out with something which is the best. There is one concept of reflexivity, because this qualitative research is reflexive, as Sholay mentioned. What does that mean? There is an influence of context and researchers' perspective on the research. People may be telling you what they have said, they are feeling and what they are thinking. But as a researcher, you are interpreting it and you are trying to make a sense out of that, out of meaning out of that. And that time, your perspective or your biases, your values will come. So it is something acknowledging that influences of relationship between the researchers, between the researcher and research topic, and the participants, what influences that will have on your research result. It will reflect what the researcher is aware of the social setting of the research, because this is a research which is going in a social context. It is not an isolated thing. It is not an artificial thing like a quantitative research. So you are aware of that when you are referring to that. It will help the stakeholders that how you have come to a particular conclusion, why you are saying this particular, whatever you have got, why you are interpreting those patterns, or why you are taking consideration those themes, and why you are coming to that theoretical framework. It also reflects that you are transparent, you are honest, and you are accountable. So it becomes an ongoing process. It will not come only at the time of reporting. You have to do that process right from when you are doing your writing down that research question and going ahead with that, every time asking yourself what it is. So as a researcher, you will examine your own judgment, your thoughts, feelings, biases, and you will be the best to think about what bias am I. Every time when you get, whether you hold any beliefs which may have led you to a particular conclusion. Ask that question not at the end for the conclusion, right from the beginning. And think about what comes to your mind and keep on noting that throughout that research endeavor. And then you can discuss it with your colleagues and take their independent review also. There is a very good article which is published in 2023 about a practical guide to the reflexivity in qualitative research, which is the AMI guide. And please go through that. They have discussed this multiple facets of reflexivity. It is personal, it is interpersonal relationship, it is with a methodological aspect and contextual. And what they have defined reflexivity is a set of continuous, as we said, collaborative with different people, researcher and the participant amongst the different researcher, and the multifaceted practices through which the researcher self-consciously critique, appraise, and evaluate how their subjectivity and their context influence the research processes. The same example as we mentioned about that elephant, that what Sholay was asking and what you were telling ultimately, your initial information, your experiences was affecting the answer which she is asking you. So your observations, your these things may get biased every time. You should ask yourself the question. Now coming lastly to some ethical consideration, the basic principles remains the same, but there are subtle ethical issues, and you have to be sensitive to the needs, values, and belief of your participants and treat them with the dignity and the respect. And reflexivity is the key every time you are asking yourself for the ethical consideration as well. So there may come in the researcher and participant relationship, it will come in the interpretation of the data or the research design. So that's what Dr. Sholay has shown you. You have to have the informed consent, written informed consent. You have to keep the participants' identities confidential. You have to ensure the participants that the gathered data by no means will be used to harm or embarrass anyone. And you have to treat them with respect. And you have to ensure that there will be minimum risk or there will be no physical or mental harm. But as I told you, there can come some problem. And you have to ensure that they can withdraw from the study where they want to. Now, the qualitative research, the participant differs from the quantitative with respect to the last one. The participant may, after participating in the focus group discussion, the participants will say that I want to withdraw from the study. You have to allow the participants to withdraw. What about the data? What about what he has said during that particular thing? See, when the focus group discussion is going on, everyone is participating, and therefore someone else's participation or someone else's responses depend on what the earlier has been said. So you may be able to say that, okay, the participant we will not quote your name and you will can withdraw. Some of the responses you may say, okay, we will not quote you, but will it be possible to remove everything, because whatever you are getting is ultimately through the interaction with each other. So right in the beginning, when you are taking their informed consent, you may have to say that you can withdraw the study, but it may not be possible to withdraw all the data from the study. So these are some subtle differences. I will, this is what we discussed. So I will just tell you the ethical issues which people have discovered, and there are many articles related to that. First of all, you have to generate the trust amongst the participants. Otherwise, why people are going to tell you what they are thinking and feeling? It is something which is very private. I will not talk to anyone who is going to come with that questionnaire or the guide, and then they are, especially when there are sensitive issues, they will not talk to you. So you have to develop some relationship with the participant to generate this trust and use that shared information for the research. You have to make it very clear to the participant right in the beginning, and that becomes really an ethical dilemma. They may tell you something which you want to use for the research, and the dilemma comes whether I should tell it. And this participant has told me, because that participant is finding a guide, a philosopher, a friend in you. From the participant point of view, you are not a separate researcher, and this is how you get immersed in the research. I already told you, not fully, some people may say that you should not disclose the purpose of the study and your role as a researcher, because you want the uncontaminated data. That is not acceptable. There could be dilemmas in the interview also, whether to continue or not. The participants may get overwhelmed so much that you can't make out whether that will harm and whether now you should continue or you should stop here and then come after some time. Sharing of the secrets by the participant. The students in interview, they may talk about some drug abuse. The person is taking some drug trafficking, some crime which they may require legal reporting. That you have to do, and you have to be very clear what is ethics and what is legality. Witnessing some unethical behavior. You may be there in the ward observing it and just making down the notes, but it may happen that you see some unethical behavior by a nurse or someone, and then it has to be reported in your report. So you can't say that this is something different and it is not related to me, because you are observing that entire scenario. Uh, there may be too lengthy or intrusive data collection methods. You have to be careful of that. You have to be see your positionality. Sometimes your positionality affects this thing. So when the participants know that you are someone topmost in the in your department and you have come yourself to collect the data, they may not give you everything, or they may tell you more than what your otherwise a junior person has said. So you have to remember that when you are talking to it, and as a reflexivity, you have to document that, whether think about it, your biases can come, creep up when that is so. If it is a small community and some specific characteristic, then if you write something about that particular participant, everyone perhaps may come to know that this is a participant who has said this. And then that confidentiality may not remain. And sometimes it may be a very sensitive issue. So one has to be very, very careful if you are taking a smaller community for the study. So when you are giving quotations, sometimes they may be anonymous, but they may reveal their identity. Maybe in the audit, as I said, there should be multiple researchers. That researcher may not be with you at the beginning, but you may have said that, okay, I want to cross-check that whatever the data is given, one other person should also go through it, whether my interpretation is correct or not. Now you are giving access to someone without the knowledge of the participant. So there comes a problem. So that you have to make it very clear in your informed consent document. You may neglect the vulnerability of the participant. Someone may be very weak. You know, when you are talking to your students, some students may be from the community of minority, or some students may be have some social problems. Some students may be economically challenged. You can't neglect them just because of that. You have to say that, especially in the focus group, that everyone in the group will their views will be taken. It is a job of the facilitator. And suppose while through this interaction, when the participants are talking to with you and talking to each other, you may get suddenly certain concept, or they may say something which is such a nice thing that you want to put it into that quote, and which can become a title of your report later on or your publication. But you have to acknowledge that participants' contribution. You may avoid, I already told you, listening to the voices of the minority. Conducting research in one's work area. You can always conduct research when you are expert in on a particular thing. Your questions and everything will be different than when you are doing the observation, because your prior knowledge may hamper your interpretation. So you have to be aware of that, whether I am interpreting my data finding because I had the prior knowledge, much more knowledge than the others in this particular area. And of course, manipulating or altering data is unethical, and making a sweeping generalization which are not supported by your finding is another thing. So be careful about that and read all these references. The slides will be with you. So read those documents to understand that. I will just show you one, this UK Statistics Authority, 6 ethical principles they have prepared. One, your research should be for the benefit of the users and it serves the public good. Now, confidentiality and security of the data should be maintained. Methods and quality, you have to have the standards of integrity and quality. You have to always think about the legal compliance, whether you are overpowering those human rights. That also, when you are using the questionnaire, you have to be very aware of that. Public's views and engagement related to your research, and the transparency. And they have made one UK Statistics Authority ethics self-assessment tool. You can take a photograph or use this slide and then visit that self-assessment tool and see where you score for a particular research finding, research which you are doing, so that you can strengthen research, your own research. Over to you, Sholeh.
Qualitative research, as we talked before.
This is your slide, Sholeh.
Yes, thank you. We think about subjectivity, multiple realities. We try to discover and describe different issues to find a deep understanding of a phenomenon of our interest. We interpret the results. We believe that the whole information that we get is much greater than each different part, and we use narratives to convey our messages. The researcher is an instrument of research and plays a key role in different steps of the research. We have our participants, and we have a context in which our research is totally linked to, because qualitative research, social bond, and it takes place in the interaction between people and their relationship with the social context. Our participants' perspectives are of major importance, and we have to consider that there are differences between quantitative research and qualitative research, that Dr. Nima explained more in her sayings. In quantitative research, you work with WH questions, but in qualitative research, our research questions are mostly about why and how questions. In quantitative research, we go with generalization, but in qualitative research, generalization or transferability of the results depend on explanation and how similar are different situations, different parts of the world. In quantitative research, we mostly gather objective data, while in qualitative research, our data is subjective. We base our work on the sayings and perspectives of our participants, and we'll look for the process and what happens during a process or formation of something. And I want to mention that in order to get more ideas about qualitative research, you can go through all these references. We suggest that you read these references in details if you're interested to do qualitative research. And I'm quite sure that whenever you apply our sayings in practice, you will get more of this session, and just to rely on the theoretical parts is not enough. It's highly appreciated if you have any questions, or to share your questions with us here, or email us your questions, or in the LMS, ask your questions if there are any, and be in touch if you want to conduct a qualitative research in practice. Dr. Nima, could you